Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at a game that was played in Armenia's capital, Yerevan, in 1988, right about the time I was just learning the rules of the game. On the white end, we have the German Grandmaster Rainer Knaak. His opponent, Armenian Grandmaster Ashot Anastasian. This is a model game for white against the Benoni. If you are to employ the system that white does in your own games, you certainly need to be familiar with this central/kingside pawn breakthrough, middle game pawn thrust. Now, admittedly, when we're working with a Benoni defense, it seems like we're always in some middle game position. It's a very sharp, rich opening, and plenty of games will not even reach that final phase. This is one of them. So let's dive in here and see how this game ends after just 23 moves. After these 5 moves, if there are 2 pawns, one for each side, that captures my attention the most, it is d5 and c5. Drawing some attention to this gives us some insight into the plans each side will try and undertake. Note that these pawns desire to move, and at the moment, they cannot. So each side will try to influence the pawns that are preventing these pawns from moving. Namely, white will try to influence d6, and black will try to influence c4. Let's see how this comes about. First of all, white's kingside piece deployment. Bishop on d3, knight on e2. This is keeping white's pawn structure fluid. In particular, white wants to stay out of the way of the f-pawn. If you go to f3, not only are you blocking the f-pawn, but you are subjecting yourself to a pin. If bishop g4 now, well, white would just punch right back and say, get out of my house and go back home. So, with the knight on e2, what does white ultimately want? To push f4 and e5. And once e5 is in, what is white doing? Influencing d6. So let's get some more moves in here. e6, castles, captures on d5, white takes towards the center. And with this, the majorities change for each side. Majority now for black on the queen side, white has a majority on the king side. If you're wondering why white is giving black this option to at some stage move c4, well, it's because white is being consistent. You don't put the knight on e2 and then end up capturing like this. The idea behind knight to e2 is to get in f4 and then an e5 pawn break. So if you're capturing like this, you don't have e5 anymore. So takes towards the center. Each side wants to get their majorities rolling now. 3-2 for black on the queen side and 5-4 for white on the king side/center. So here we go. Knight a6. Multiple moves from this point on are directed at getting the majorities rolling. Knight a6 is one of them, looking to pivot on c7 to support b5. h3 is useful for long-term wise flight square, but more importantly, the primary function right now is to rule out a knight pivot on g4 into, let's say, the e5 square. Okay, knight c7 and a4. So this is preventing black from getting the majority rolling. b5 was a threat. Notice with the pressure on e4, if, I don't know, white just makes a kind of a passing move, let's just say king in the corner, b5 could already be played. The bishop on d3, it's important to note, is an overloaded piece, overworked piece, has 2 jobs. So if there happens to be a capture like this, what ends up happening is that the e-pawn has just been exchanged for the b-pawn, and this would favor team black. So that's why we have right now a4 stopping b5. Continuing, a6. Black still has some work to do before he is in a position to play b5. Rook has to help and get to the b8 square. Bishop g5 first. The bishop can kind of be stuck. If you're playing f4 too soon, The bishop, it doesn't have an active role. Certainly, it has an active role now, being on g5. There is a pin there, so should e5 hit, it's going to hit pretty hard. Rook b8, sure enough f4, getting the majorities rolling, and from here queen to e8, getting out of a pin, and at the same time it is supporting this b5 advance, supporting that majority. Bishop c2 is clearing the way. We're 14 moves in. This is already a very critical moment, big moment for Team Black right here. White's last move, bishop c2, is clearing the way so the queen has direct sight of d5. White really wants this e5 pawn break. But doing it, let's say right now, well, that would be, there's this capture on d5. Could make a capture here, but okay. White wants some supportive d5. Bishop d2, bishop to c2 gives white that. And from here we have h6. This is the one variation I want to highlight. This is where there's a turning point in the game after these, after this move 14, bishop c2. It's important for Black to just follow through here and play b5. Black has enough support for it, should play it right here, and I'd like to highlight this variation. This is what Black should be doing, and we arrive at a really difficult position. I'm about to show you a position that I don't quite know how to assess. So let me show you one of the better lines here. e5, knight d7, and d6. This is getting pretty crazy. White is about to win the exchange, but if you do that, you're going to be giving up a strong dark square bishop. This is a really difficult position for me to assess. Maybe I'll throw this one to you. Who would you rather be in this position? At the moment, Black has a slight material plus, but the computer actually says it's better for Black. There's really a lot to take into account here. Tough position to wrap one's head around. For me, at least. Anyhow, this is considered best in the computer's eyes to throw that b5 move in there. In this game, we have h6. This is giving White a wonderful window of opportunity to seize the initiative and start directing play here. White does so with the capture on f6. This is a capture you really have to, well, you could play it in a way quickly in this position because there are follow-up moves that pack a strong punch, but my point here is that you don't want to just give away your dark square bishop for a knight. This bishop can turn out to be an absolute monster. It's coordinated really well with the pawns that are on dark squares, and yeah, it could really turn out to be a giant pain in White's side, giant thorn. However, with White's follow-up, this thematic central/kingside pawn thrust I referenced at the beginning of this video, notice how Black's bishop is completely shut down. e5 is in there, even though White doesn't have enough direct support for it. This is a pawn sacrifice. After a capture, White is not recapturing, but rather playing f5. This is the thematic pawn thrust I'm referring to. e5, and after a capture, you play f5. What is accomplished exactly with this? The e5 pawn is now an obstacle for the Black pieces. The bishop cannot see the world along this main diagonal, nor can the queen along the e-file. Moreover, it provides a wonderful outpost, a much more secure outpost for the White knights. Knight on e5, and also, let's not forget, going into John Madden mode here, I realize, but let's not forget that this d5 pawn has what? Some mobility now. This is now passed. d6 in there packs a strong punch. Okay, after f5, what does Black do? Capture, d6 on board. It's a sad situation for the knight. Two options, choose one. If you go to the corner, well, you might as well just resign. Knight e6, knight d5. Notice the squares that are now available. Now that this pawn has moved, this knight on c3 has a wonderful jumping point. coordinated well with the pawn on d6. Everything is being tied together very well. Excellent coordination with a punch on f6. Bishop g7 in the game. Rook takes f5. And now knight d4. We're almost at the end of the game here. Knight takes knight in the game. And black just recaptures on d4. Here's something interesting. If bishop takes rook, white would take with the knight. And white is without question the better side. I wondered how much better would white actually be in this position. I threw this position on the... I plugged this position into the computer without this rook around, and white is still the better side. That's how strong this position is for Team White. Doesn't even need a rook and is still the better side. The serious threat in this position is queen g4, queen takes bishop, game over. Serious mate in 2 threat. Okay, well, black doesn't take the rook here. Those knights would be killers. In the game, e takes d4, and now we have knight e7 check, king h8, and the final move of the game, the only pop quiz I'm throwing your way. What does white play next? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the star move, the winning move here. There are many, but the absolute best is rook f6. This is a wonderful move, and I'm sure it's one that Team White was familiar with from a game that Fischer played against Pal Benko in 1963 at the U.S. Championships. This is preventing black's f-pawn from advancing to f5. White wants to now form a battery along this diagonal and sweep in for mate. So, for example... Okay, black resigned here, but if the rook is captured, this is the deadly follow-up. Queen d3, and what are you doing about queen h7 mate? You can't run with the king, that's no help. Black has to make these kind of moves. Bishop f5, you take. And if d3, well, at this stage, you don't have to focus on getting to h7. You could take the bishop with check, and then kind of give some, I don't know, long distance mate. I don't know what you call that. Yeah, this would be a nice finish as well. But this move is just preventing f5 and paving the way for a wonderful battery getting into the h7 square. No good defense for Team Black from here. If, let's say, c4 is in, stopping queen to d3, well, the queen has another route into the attack, and we see the additional point behind rook f6, some pressure against that h6 point by the rook and queen. And soon enough there will be some sacrifice there, leading to some mate. Okay, well, anyhow, as mentioned, I feel that this is one of the model games for white against the Benoni. Very thematic, central / kingside pawn breakthrough you need to be familiar with. e5, and then after a capture, f5. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away from it. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.